I once thought silence was the same thing as harmony, that as long as no voices were raised, everything was fine, that calm automatically meant love. That belief collapsed on an ordinary Thursday night in front of 6 people who barely knew me. We were out to dinner with her colleagues, people whose jokes and stories had nothing to do with my world. I was present, but invisible, and looking back, that was probably intentional. She leaned toward one of the men at the table, Mark, I think, just a little too close. Her laughter was sharper than usual, a bit forced. Her fingers grazed his forearm, maybe harmless, maybe not. Someone made an offhand comment about how long we'd been together. I smiled out of habit. She didn't. Instead, she tilted her head, studied me like I was unfinished work, and said plainly, "You're just convenient, not thrilling." The conversation died instantly. Even Mark looked away. I stayed quiet. Not because I had nothing to say, but because my silence mattered more than any response. I really looked at her then and realized I was staring at someone I didn't recognize. The woman who once squeezed my hand in crowded rooms now pulled away like I was an inconvenience. I gave a small smile, barely there, because something inside me shut down in a way that felt final. She laughed nervously and tried to backtrack, said she was kidding, but her eyes didn't soften the way they used to. No warmth, just distance. Later, I stood at the kitchen sink while she scrolled on her phone from the couch. We said nothing. We hadn't really talked in weeks. She didn't apologize or acknowledge the moment. And oddly, I wasn't wounded the way I expected. I wasn't angry or bitter. I was finished. When I lay beside her that night, I understood this wasn't a phase or a rough patch. It was the start of something she wouldn't notice until it was too late. I stopped chasing explanations. I stopped defending myself. I wasn't going to raise my voice or beg. I was going to fade while standing right next to her, and she wouldn't realize it until the quiet became unbearable. A few days later, I stopped by her office to grab a charger I'd left in her car. No agenda, just in and out. But through the glass doors, I saw her before she saw me. She was by the coffee machine with a man I didn't know. Tall, relaxed. The way she angled her body toward him was familiar. Too familiar. The same expression she once reserved for me when everything still felt new. I paused just long enough to hear her laugh, not polite or professional, but warm and unguarded, like that part of her hadn't disappeared after all. I turned around and walked out. It didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like confirmation, a silent checkmark next to a doubt I'd been avoiding. That night, her phone lit up at 11:48 p.m. She glanced at it, smiled, locked the screen, and placed it face down. She assumed I hadn't noticed. I always noticed. I just used to lie to myself about it. I didn't ask who it was. I didn't need to. The next morning, she joked that I seemed distracted, said I was probably tired, kissed my cheek like everything was normal. Maybe it was normal for her. For me, something had shifted. I wasn't hurting anymore. I was observing, watching patterns instead of moments. This wasn't about one man or one message. It was about a long decision she'd already made, that I wasn't worth choosing fully or consistently, and my choice to finally stop pretending otherwise. A few days later, a friend of mine, Lucas, asked me to grab a drink. At the bar, he gave me that look people give when they sense something's wrong but don't want to push. He said her name, hesitated, then asked if I was okay. I nodded. I wasn't ready to admit I was sharing a home with someone who treated me like a responsibility, that I hadn't felt wanted in months. I changed the subject. That night, when I came home, she was asleep with her phone still glowing in her hand, and I knew then there would be no confrontation, no shouting, no dramatic ending, just distance, quiet, deliberate distance. She wouldn't notice it at first. But eventually, the absence would grow sharp, and she'd understand too late that I wasn't mad. I was already gone. People like to think it's one huge betrayal that breaks everything, but it never is. It's the buildup, the tiny signs, the inconsistencies you explain away because the truth feels too heavy to hold. Once I stopped protecting the illusion, I started seeing everything clearly. It began with our shared calendar. She used to insist we sync everything, meetings, trips, even grocery runs. Now whole afternoons were empty. I'd ask about her day and she'd shrug, say, just meetings, no details, no eye contact. Then there were the receipts. She'd never bothered hiding them before, but one morning while taking out the trash, I noticed one folded neatly near the top. Lunch at a hotel bar across town, table for two. I didn't question her. I started collecting information, not for revenge, not for drama, for clarity, bank notifications that didn't line up, message previews that vanished too quickly, new passwords on devices that used to stay unlocked. An AirTag meant for her luggage showing movement on a random Tuesday afternoon where it had no reason to be. The signs were obvious now, but I didn't feel betrayed. I felt steady, calm, because I'd stopped trying to save the relationship and started looking after myself. I watched the way her phone never left her side, how she flinched if I picked it up, even just to pass it back, how she'd laugh softly in the bathroom while texting, then come out expressionless. The emotional back and forth didn't sting anymore. It just confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't her priority. Maybe I hadn't been for a long time. She still went through the motions, calling me babe, asking me to grab eggs, checking if I needed anything from the store, but it was automatic, like muscle memory. Her presence felt like furniture, familiar, useful, cold. One night, I opened old vacation photos, not out of nostalgia, but analysis. I looked at her eyes, the way she leaned into me back then, the effortless affection. It was gone, deliberately, not accidentally. I'd been holding on to a version of her that no longer existed. She was already somewhere else, emotionally, maybe physically too. So I stopped fixing things. I started observing her the way she once observed me in the beginning. Quiet, attentive, detached. This wasn't love anymore, it was preparation. A stillness before a silence she wouldn't know how to survive. I didn't leave with noise. No slammed doors, no shouting, no notes. I started vanishing in layers. First, I cut off my constant availability. She was used to me always answering texts, picking up calls, filling every gap. Now, every response was deliberate. I muted notifications, not out of anger, but precision. I wanted space, a new rhythm where I no longer orbited her moods. When she asked me to grab something after work, I said I had plans. I didn't. When she called to check in, I let it ring. The silence wasn't loud. It was surgical. She noticed sooner than I thought. At first, subtle glances when I walked into the room, a hesitant, "Hey," if I didn't respond. I let the quiet fill the space we used to call connection. I started working later, even without work, took long walks without saying a word. Left the apartment before she woke. No goodbye, no explanation. One text, "Where are you?" I read it, locked my phone, kept sipping coffee in a place she didn't know existed. Routines crumbled without my reinforcement. Years of balancing both sides of the structure collapsed instantly. She called again, asking about dinner. I said not to wait. No excuses, no reasons. When I returned, she sat on the couch, makeup smudged, TV on but silent. Looked at me, almost startled. "You didn't say where you were," she said. I shrugged, passed her, closed the door. Silence. The next morning, location sharing was off. She noticed, faked indifference. I stopped asking how she slept, stopped offering coffee, stopped waiting for her to bed. I existed, but I wasn't present. That made all the difference. Presence isn't bodies in the same room. It's energy. Mine had left. I didn't ghost her. I became invisible in plain sight. At work, sharper, clearer. Friends noticed. Told them I started putting myself first. At home, she was lost. No script, no control over the change because I wasn't reacting. I wasn't teaching her how to treat me anymore. And in that silence, she began to feel the weight of something she thought impossible to lose. Not because I left, but because I stopped trying to stay. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't exposing her. But quiet reveals more than confrontation ever could. Patterns became clear. The coworker she laughed with too freely. He appeared everywhere in her stories, always just enough to raise questions, never enough to answer them. I didn't confront her. I confronted the data. One night, while she slept facing the wall, I opened her laptop. Not to read messages, not needed. What mattered was what she allowed, not what she said. I found an email chain, mundane on the surface but telling. His name linked to purchases flagged by internal audits. I screenshotted what I needed, closed everything, left no trace. The next day, anonymously, I sent it to HR from a public library. No threat, no message, just facts. I didn't watch the fallout, but I did. She came home tenser, short-tempered, snapping over small things, TV volume, hallway clutter. She didn't mention him, didn't have to. Work consequences bled into posture, tone, pace. I listened, observed, and the quiet revealed more than words ever could. She wasn't flirting anymore, defensive, clipped. The gap I created wasn't vengeance, it was clarity. She had underestimated me. The person who stopped asking to be seen had a precision she couldn't anticipate. Her world of secret indulgences, carefully hidden, began unraveling quietly, methodically, without confrontation. Her unraveling wasn't explosive, it was subtle, creeping into every corner of her life. She became colder around friends, irritable and defensive, pulling back from dinners, group chats, invitations. People didn't stop liking her, they stopped noticing her. At first, she blamed timing, busyness, coincidence. But deep down, she knew. The tension, the shift, the light around her dimming without flicker, it was undeniable. She stayed home more, not because she wanted to, but because she had nowhere else to go. I moved through the house like I belonged, but without caring. That was the hardest part for her. I was still there, but no longer hers. She tested the boundaries, small gestures, a cup of coffee, leaving the TV on shows I liked. I didn't react. One evening, I found her at the dining table, staring at her laptop, waiting for answers that wouldn't come. I walked past, sat on the couch, scrolled on my phone, unaffected. She was unused to it. She had built a world where I always filled the silence, always reached across the emotional gap. Now the gap remained, and she didn't know how to navigate it. I watched her move slower, hesitate, brace herself for the coldness she once gave me without thought. This was the version of her I'd never seen, unguarded, unsure, exposed. But it was too late. She had built a life expecting me to carry the weight of both our hearts, and the moment I let go, everything quietly fell apart. Her routines collapsed. She stopped wearing makeup at home, stopped checking her phone, stopped performing for a world that no longer responded to her. She tried to reach me once, brushed against me like an accident in the kitchen. I didn't flinch, didn't step forward. I moved around her like she was furniture, not from cruelty but clarity. She wasn't losing me. She had already lost me. For the first time, she sat in silence alone. Not because I left, but because I stayed and removed everything I had to give. I had expected the ending to be loud, shouting, slammed doors, a suitcase. But endings rarely arrive that way. They arrive in stillness, ordinary nights where nothing seems amiss until you realize everything has shifted. One evening, she watched me from the hallway while I scrolled through emails. Something flickered in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Hesitation. Not sarcasm, not attitude. Hesitation. She asked if we could talk. I didn't answer. She spoke slowly, carefully. I felt you distant. Something's changed. I can't feel you anymore. I said nothing. She asked if I was angry, hiding something. I told her I wasn't angry. I was done trying. Her face tightened, unsure whether to fight, cry, or pretend it didn't matter. She asked what that meant. Done trying. I explained I'd been holding up something she walked away from repeatedly, and now I was finally focusing on my own happiness, the things she said she wanted all along. She went quiet. That silence, the kind that once terrified me, no longer felt like punishment. It felt like peace. She tried again. Said things didn't have to be this way. That we could find our rhythm. But it wasn't rhythm, it was trust. When someone tells you through action that your happiness isn't their responsibility, the music doesn't just stop, it changes key. You realize you've been dancing alone. I told her that, not as a speech, just fact. She wanted to interrupt, to defend herself, but she couldn't. Her words from months ago had come full circle. Now she stood before someone already gone. Being done doesn't involve yelling, pleading, or even leaving. It involves stopping, withdrawing, refusing to fill a space you no longer own.